How's it going, everyone, and welcome into the SFS channel for another episode of our weekly trade advice here for 2021 fantasy football action. This has become one of my favorite episodes to make for you all on a weekly basis, and I think you guys enjoy it as well. So before we jump into today's video, make sure to drop a like and click that subscribe button if you're new around here. We're closing in on 3K subs. It'd be awesome to reach that milestone by the end of this week, as we've been grinding hard for you guys all season and trying to help you out and become the best fantasy players that you can this year. We're going to cap it off with a lot of league championships and win a lot of fantasy titles for you all this year. So thank you all so much for tuning into today's video. Let's hit the intro and get straight in to our first player, and we'll be discussing, obviously, their trade status here in Week 8. Alrighty, here we go. So we're going to be kicking off today's video by talking about, obviously, one of the most popular players in football in general, the former MVP, Super Bowl MVP, and perennial and consensus-wide QB1 for fantasy football, that being Patrick Mahomes. But for those of you who have been watching this season, he has been anything but the QB1. He's been anything but a consistent and reliable difference maker in fantasy lineups. He has been, to be very blunt, a ineffective and disappointing fantasy quarterback in a lot of contests for us this season. Now, obviously, he's had his ceiling games. He's had some productive performances. But man, has he been disappointing for someone who was the first quarterback off the board in essentially every fantasy league out there this season. So the advice we have for Pat Mahomes typically goes against the standard here at SFS. This goes against the typical precedent, I should say, for what our advice tends to trend towards and to be here on the channel. And that is that we do not like going out and trading for quarterbacks and for making hefty offers to receive quarterbacks on the other end of your fantasy trades, because we think it's one of the most replaceable positions in fantasy football, and one such that you can go out there, find ways to stream other options, and go out, and in most case scenarios, unless you're getting a top-end Tier 1A player, there are ways to replicate that production in your lineup in other ways that might be more valuable to you in the broader perspective of your fantasy teams. With Pat Mahomes, though, the value and the panic surrounding him right now has created an opportunity such that we believe it is worth your investment to go out and buy for Pat Mahomes right now. In return, if you are a Pat Mahomes owner right now, you're absolutely holding. The trade value in the market is unlikely to be out there for you to go out and to get a fair and respectable offer in return for Patrick Mahomes. So again, if you're a Pat Mahomes owner right now, I would hold, because I think that especially after this past week's games, you're not feeling too great about what you could actually go out and acquire from another team right now. But Pat Mahomes is still a player of insane talent. He's still got the arm ability to make all those crazy throws. He's still got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, although they've been banged up, not producing up to par lately. He's still in an offense led by Andy Reid, and he's still got a terrible defense, which will put them in positions where they have a game script that forces them to throw the football late. Pat Mahomes has been disappointing, though. This burden, this blame falls more on him than it does anyone else on this offense for the lack of productivity. He's got 9 interceptions. He is tied right now with Zach Wilson, the rookie for the Jets, for the most picks in the NFL this year. That's atrocious. I mean, Pat, we got to do better. Moving forward the rest of the way this season, I'm banking on the fact that a player who had 6 picks a year ago is going to figure it out. I am betting on the player who a lot of people are bailing on right now, who has been talked about as the baby goat per se, and now I think that to begin with, that whole argument was a bit far-fetched and early to start off with before we even get into that debate here. But nonetheless, Patrick Mahomes is an absurd talent with one of the best play callers in football. If you can go out here, lowball a trade for him, buy low, there's a great opportunity. Again, going back to the 9 picks, that's heavily concerning. That's something that needs to change. We can't argue about that. The turnovers have to come down. He has 17 total of them on the season for this Kansas City offense. We're just moving into Week 8 now, so he's got over 2 per week. He's got to fix that. That's got to change. But the panic, the impatience of some fantasy owners out there is going to allow you to move off of him early, or move them off of their lineups, earlier than they might be suited to do so. And if they do choose to move Patrick Mahomes before he potentially gets back on track here, and you can capitalize on Mahomes' productivity and obviously track record, because we've seen him throughout his seasons as a starter be one of the best quarterbacks. That's why he's been drafted as the first QB off the board for 2 seasons now, because of how good he is, because of the crazy things that he does that almost no one else in football can do. He's an immense talent. He's got talent surrounding him. And again, if he can stop forcing throws and stop trying to play hero ball, he's got the offensive playmakers around him to combat the bad defense and to keep up and potentially have an incredible fantasy ceiling in these games, because he's going to have to keep scoring points to keep up in these matchups. But again, he's got to stop forcing the ball. He's got to stop turning things over here and losing us fantasy points while he's trying to make these comebacks. So if he can just get on the other side of things here, make small improvements on a week-to-week basis, we can trend back towards those QB1 numbers that we're all expecting and holding him to the standard of here as we move forward this season. Before we get into our next piece of trade advice for Week 8 action here, we're going to take a quick second to talk about our friends and one of our great partners here at the SFS channel, OddsJam, and the great features and tools they provide to you when betting on sports this NFL season. OddsJam is a website that compares over 35 top sports books and helps you find the best value regardless of which side of a betting situation you're on in an individual sporting matchup. We're going to take a look at an example here for the Thursday night football game that's going to be happening in a couple of days here between the Arizona Cardinals and the Green Bay Packers. And essentially what OddsJam does for you here is they highlight in yellow the best odds for each side of a given matchup. So if you wanted to bet on the Cardinals here for the straight money line contest, they show you FanDuel highlighted in yellow at minus 245 odds for the favored Cardinals is going to give you the best return on every dollar you invest into that given matchup. And if you're going with the Packers, my hometown team, we're going with the green and gold this week, picking the underdogs here, even without Devontae Adams, potentially even without their defensive coordinator who's on COVID leave. It's lofty expectations to hope they could win this game, but if you want to bet them at plus 220 odds, there is a variety of sports books that give you that opportunity to get that great return on your investment. Another one of my favorite features on OddsJam is their arbitrage betting section, which is essentially risk-free betting that they've done by finding mathematical line discrepancies through various sports games on different sports books. So going back to that, what you're going to do here is they have given you various sports books for certain betting games and situations that you're going to want to make, and you're going to want to place an even bet on each side of these betting matchups. So for example, we've got the Detroit Lions versus Philadelphia Eagles. You're going to want to bet on the total points at over or under 61.5, the plus 480 on FanDuel, and the minus 475 on either DraftKings or the other sports book that they've outlined for you in order to get a guaranteed return on the money you put into that contest. For more profitable returns on your sports betting this season and to utilize the tools that I've outlined here from OddsJam, head over to their website. The link is in the description of today's episode. Check them out. Use their features. There's a lot of great stuff to take advantage of here and potentially win some cash for you this season. All right, there you have it. Go check out our friends OddsJam. Their website, oddsjam.com, is linked in the description of today's video, and become a more profitable sports bettor this NFL season, or with whatever sport you choose to watch in addition to the National Football League. Elijah Mitchell is our next player up for discussion here today after his big performance on Sunday night against the Indianapolis Colts in whatever that monsoon, weird rainstorm, floating river. If you guys are watching the broadcast, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there was some floating river in the clouds that was flying over the 49ers stadium, and it was like leaking water all over onto the football field, which in essence created a very heavy rainfall. It was weird. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm just telling you what I saw. I'm just relaying what I heard. Even the people on NBC were very confused about this weird weather phenomenon, and I am as well. Basically what happened is it was really, really hard to play football and pass the ball downfield, so it was a heavy ground game in rushing attack for this 49ers offense and the Colts offense. Obviously, on the other side of things, Elijah Mitchell basically tied his previous best game this season, that being the season opener against the Detroit Lions, where he ran for over 100 yards and had a rushing touchdown. Mitchell had 18 carries for 107 and a TD against the Colts. I'm selling right now. This is a perfect situation. He's hit his ceiling. We've seen him peak at this point twice already this year. This is a 49ers backfield. Do I need to say more? They're unreliable. Kyle Shanahan switches between his running backs ad nauseum, and he goes, boom, switch. He's all over the place. He can't decide and make up his mind who his guy is. Now, Elijah Mitchell has been that consistent force so far this season in this lineup, but he's had injuries. He's missed time. And how much do you really trust him still on a week-to-week basis? He still had 2 back-to-back 6-point performances in between those 2 16-point games. So it's not like you're getting a super consistent floor and safe option in your lineups on a week-to-week basis. I see him more as a boom or bust RB2 weekly, and that's kind of the vibe we get from a lot of these 49ers running backs. Even looking back at Raheem Mostert, if he was the lead back for this offense, he's typically a boom or bust player. It's if the 49ers are in the swing of things, if they're in the football game, you're going to get a lot of work done on the ground. But the 49ers right now, to my eye test, don't look like that great of a team. I think they're going to fall into ruts. They're going to have more games this season where they are less productive than expected because of the fact that they're trailing games late, trying to pass and use Jimmy Garoppolo to catch up late in games, which is always a disaster and never ends well for the 49ers. So Elijah Mitchell, someone I'm selling here. This is a player that I don't know if you're going to expect much production better than what he saw in week 7, and you don't want to be on the shorter end of the stick when things don't go so hot for San Francisco and he has lower end numbers for your lineups. A.J. Brown, someone I'm holding this week after back-to-back impressive performances. We were waiting on this. This was expected. A.J. Brown, we all knew, had the talent, had the ability to make explosive plays after the catch, score touchdowns, being a physically imposing wide receiver. He just wasn't, whether it was in the right realm of his own health, like was he physically unable to produce up to his standards? He was missing games with hamstring injuries. Was he just having the drops and able to haul in passes and catch them on a consistent basis? Whatever the case was, that's out of the woods now. We are officially into the strength of A.J. Brown season now, making big plays downfield, winning contested grabs, scoring touchdowns, looking like a dominant player after the catch. It was bound to happen. He was too talented to fail for an extended period of time this season. I knew that at some point or another, he would begin to put up the numbers we've seen from him in the past. This isn't the highest passing volume offense. This isn't a team that's going to give him 10 targets a game. But what he is talented and skilled enough to produce with the looks that he does get, and those opportunities are enough. And it has been for him the last 2 weeks, back-to-back 90-plus yard receiving games, found the end zone against the Chiefs this week. I think he'll be just fine, again, especially considering Julio Jones' struggles and his health inconsistencies as well. I think A.J. Brown might have a fair amount of opportunities with himself as the lone top dog in this offense. Josh Jacobs, someone I'm continuing to sell here. What is it with this guy having little to no production in the rushing department and then salvaging his entire week with a rushing touchdown? It's happened over and over again this season. The guy hasn't ran for more than 53 yards in a given contest. 53 yards. You're barely getting halfway to 100, which is like the benchmark that we are expecting Damian Harris to get to, because like Josh Jacobs, he's not a heavily involved pass catcher. And Jacobs just happens to be scoring more touchdowns than Damian Harris and falling in the end zone more. He was outtouched by Kenyon Drake in the rushing department by 8 carries. Since the change to the obviously the assistant coach who moved up and is now the interim head coach for the Raiders, I forget his name off the top of my head, replacing John Gruden, Kenyon Drake has been way more of a pest than he was when John Gruden was the coach and Josh Jacobs was getting the majority of the volume in this offense. 29 rushing yards was all he totaled in week 7. That's not going to cut it. If he doesn't score that touchdown, his total weekly output is completely changed. He's very dependent on touchdown production. He is very underutilized. He could be a pass-catching running back. He's not an elitely dynamic player, but he could be used that way. He's just not. That's not part of his fantasy skill set on a weekly basis that gives him an extra and added dynamic of an elite ceiling. He will come out here and catch more passes this year than we've seen him do in years past, and he has been more productive. I will give him that. But the rushing numbers and the overall yardage production outside of his touchdown scoring has not been reliable or dependable enough to keep him as even a consistent RB2 this year, again, if you're taking those touchdowns away. So, Josh Jacobs, this guy gives me headaches every week. I mean, I don't own any shares of him, but just watching other players and just hearing, they're waiting for some production in their lineups. I'm like, well, send me your team. I'll let you know what I think. And they've got Josh Jacobs. And I just take a sigh, a deep, depressing sigh, and I say, I'm sorry. If he doesn't score a touchdown, you're probably going to be left high and dry. So Josh Jacobs, move off of him if you got the chance. Try and sell him for a more reliable option, someone who's more involved in the receiving game and can find avenues to be a relevant fantasy scorer in any fashion outside of scoring touchdowns. Touchdowns should be like an added sweetener and something that gives you a bonus on top of the productivity you've already had that gives you those ceiling numbers, and not something that you are grasping to as the sole contributor to your productivity. So Josh Jacobs, I have been very, very off of him throughout the draft process all the way this season. I'm continuing to try and find ways out of Josh Jacobs' ownership. Darren Waller, his teammate though, someone I'm looking to buy right now. He's been kind of weird this year. It's been kind of tough to get a feel for Darren Waller's production this season. He had 19 targets week 1. And after that, his production is it has been very much on a downward trajectory. But he's still uber talented, the best pass catcher in this Raiders offense, and his value has dropped to an all-time low right now with him not making the Philadelphia Eagles game. He was out for that contest and now heading into a bye week. I'm sure that there is some uncertainty in that Darren Waller owners right now are stirring a little bit in their seats, wondering and waiting for his productivity to increase again. The only way that if I'm a Darren Waller owner right now that I'm selling him, because his value has hit in such a low point, because prior to his injury, his numbers weren't living up to expectations, obviously, and he hasn't quite been the premier tight end 2 that we all expected him to be this season. The only way I'm selling him is if I know I can get in return someone who is going to produce more points in my lineup on a weekly basis than what Waller was giving me, in addition to you maybe having another avenue for consistent and productive tight end scoring. Otherwise, I'm hanging on to him. His trade value, if you were to move off of him, is likely not enough to get in return what you should be asking for in exchange for Darren Waller. So if you can go out and buy him right now, I'm all for that. I think that he still has some upside here. I still think that there is a chance he finishes as a top 3 tight end this year. He's got his work cut out for him because now you're competing with Kyle Pitts, whose arrow has been pointed upwards the last 2 or 3 weeks, whereas Darren Waller has been kind of a steady dip since that week 1 game against, I forget who they were playing, but he had, 19 targets, like I said. So Darren Waller, someone I'm looking to buy this week. I think that he still has a chance to have an elite level finish to this season and get back on track from where those numbers started at this year. Terry McLaurin, another wide receiver like A.J. Brown, I'm going to hold on to after this past week's games. This was the expectation. The guy is super talented. We've known that since his rookie season, whether it's running routes, his athleticism, his field stretching ability, his contested catch, win rate. He puts everything together that you look for in a true alpha number 1 wide receiver. He's just struggled with consistency because of the quarterback play around him. It's like DJ Moore. It's like Calvin Ridley, who is dealing with what looked like at the start of the season a washed Matt Ryan, who has since kind of flipped the script a little bit and looks a little bit more salvageable right now. But Terry McLaurin really has been struggling as a result of Taylor Heineke's inconsistent play. If that can just stabilize a little bit here, we've seen it multiple times. The Giants game, the Packers, he can come out here and have a massive ceiling. Throughout the draft process, we discussed Terry McLaurin as being a boom or bust weekly lineup play, and that has very much been the case so far this season. We just have to cross our fingers and hope that that can stabilize a little bit and turn into elongated weekly fantasy success the rest of this season. I am holding here for the reason that I believe in the talent. The target share has been there basically every week so far this year. If he continues to get looks and opportunities, he is going to produce more often than not. He's too good of a talent. He's too impressive as a player and gets too many opportunities. I was saying this about DJ Moore's and Calvin Ridley's. They have too much going for them to consistently fail in an offense. Terry McLaurin is far and away the best offensive player for this football team. They are going to make a priority getting him the football and producing numbers for their team. So Terry McLaurin, someone I'm going to continue to believe in this season. Hang on to him if he's on your lineups and on your teams. I think that he'll continue to impress this season. Damian Harris, someone we talked about just a little while ago when we kind of referenced Josh Jacobs. We're going to be selling Damian Harris as well. This is another player that I'm looking to move off of here for similar reasons to Josh Jacobs. He's even less of an involved running back in the receiving game than Josh Jacobs is. but he's still got a cap ceiling, and that's the reason that we are looking to sell Damian Harris. He is a very steady RB2 producer. He's got great floor value in standard leagues, but I'm looking to move off of him here because we've kind of established and know exactly what his ceiling is. It's 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He can't really give you more than that. If you can move off of him here and even find someone who might be a little bit less consistent, but has the opportunity to go out and have high-scoring production games that can win you your given weeks and matchups, someone involved more in the receiving game, has more of an explosive element in their offense, less competition for touches, as we see Brandon Bolden and Ramondre Stevenson starting to eat into this workload a little bit, I'm looking to move Harris here. So there's definitely an element of a maxed out ceiling potential. I don't think that he can get better than a certain point in fantasy lineups this year. So I'm looking to move Harris right now, move on to bigger and better things. An example would be Cordero Patterson. I'd rather have Patterson on my team than Damian Harris because I think that with Patterson's rushing involvement that we saw, very impressive this past week, and he produced in spite of his lack of receiving involvement. When he trends back to those receiving numbers that we've seen from him in games prior to that matchup, I think that you'll see a higher overall ceiling and a similar floor for Patterson on a weekly basis. Joe Mixon, someone I'm going out and buying for right now. Joe's touches, volume, and usage have been down since he injured his ankle and was basically a game-time decision against the Packers a couple weeks back. Since then, Samaje Perine has been very involved, splitting carries almost straight down the center of the line for this Bengals offense, but that's not something I expect to be the trend long-term this year. Joe Mixon's the most talented running back on this team. He's one of the most reliable running backs in the league to get a heavy volume usage rate and involvement in his offense. His rushing attempts per game when he was fully healthy this season and last year were almost unrivaled outside of your Dalvin Cooks and Christian McCaffreys. This guy gets the football a ton. I love the upside here. This Bengals offense is pointed upwards in terms of the trend that their production is having. They have put up very, very impressive and awesome numbers so far this year. Joe Burrow and that team are rolling. I'm not betting against them right now. In spite of their offensive line woes, they have seemed to fix that issue. Their run blocking has been at least up to par, and it's not great, it's not terrible, it just kind of meets our expectations here and gets the job done at the end of the day. I think Joe Mixon, once he gets back to full health, we'll see those touches increase back up to normal, and if you can capitalize on some owners kind of looking at the box score, saying how come Joe Mixon's touches are down, take advantage of that and go out and buy him for your teams this week. Mike Evans, 2 more names to talk about today. I'm going to sell Mike Evans. Here's the simple reason why. It's not that I don't believe in Mike Evans' ability to produce. It's not that I don't believe in this Tampa Bay offense. I think he just had his best game of his season. I'm looking to take advantage of that, soak up some additional value and opportunity for production in my lineup, and move off him here. Great game, 3 touchdowns. Production was awesome. He looked like a very impressive player. We've known Mike Evans is an awesome guy. We've watched him with Jameis Winston be one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. We all know what he can do. But let's talk about who wasn't on the field. Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown. Arguably Tom Brady's 2 favorite targets on that football team, especially situationally. Gronk is unquestionably, I know he loves Mike Evans too, but Gronk is his go-to safety valve in the red zone. That's the guy that we saw Gronk scoring touchdowns left and right in the early stages of the season while he was still healthy, because that's the connection that he's known for such a large part of his career. He's going to go to Gronk over and over again. That is a given. And Antonio Brown, since arriving with the Buccaneers, he's like in the TB12 inner circle, the most targeted player on that team since that point last year when the Buccaneers brought him on board. Now, obviously, being out last game changes things a little bit here. But moving forward, you're talking about 2 significant key players in this offense not being out there on the field. That led to very, very high productivity from both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. For a guy in Mike Evans who, again, I think just saw his best and most impressive game of the season, I am looking to sell right now, get as much value back in return as I can. Now, obviously, if you don't find the right deal, you're not making this trade. But if you can find a situation where I'm going to be releasing my updated, I guess that won't be coming out this week, my updated running back rest of season rankings will be out here in week 8. But last week, we just posted our rest of season rankings for the wide receivers in week 7. If you can make some sort of a jump and improve the standing you have with your player on that rankings list, now obviously there's going to be minor tweaks there, but if you can find an avenue to basically get a better long-term asset to your team, I am doing so because I think that Mike Evans will see his production trend back down towards the mean once those two players who are very, very key contributors in this offense return to the field healthy and produce for this Bucs offense. And then Jamar Chase here. A simple one, a simple case to be made. We're done with this conversation and discussion of whether or not he's going to be able to maintain his productivity, consistency, and effectiveness in this Bengals offense. If you've been watching the channel, watching the episodes, you've heard me talk ad nauseum about the chemistry he and Joe Burrow have. It's on a level even entirely deeper than what I have been praising them for. These two are unstoppable. Jamar Chase genuinely might make the All-Pro list as a rookie wide receiver. He's got to be almost a shoo-in to win Offensive Rookie of the Year at this point. I mean, it's probably all but over with, assuming he stays healthy for the full 17-game schedule for Cincinnati. This kid's route running, his ability to win after the break, his run after a catch is even better than I expected it to be. We saw that against the Ravens here in what was a major test game for this offense and for him in particular, facing one of the league's best corners in Marlon Humphrey. Absolutely ran him clean all day. I mean, holy cow, this kid is special. At this point, I'm holding in almost any trade scenario. I can't think of a player, and this isn't necessarily to say that Jamar Chase is my rest of season wide receiver 2, because I think that's still that'd be very generous to assess him as that player at this point in time. But man, outside of Devontae Adams, maybe Tyreek Hill, who's been having some inconsistencies here. I mean, Jamar Chase is a perfect 7 for 7 right now in terms of hitting a fantasy floor and adding ceiling value on top of that. He has been one of the best wide receivers in fantasy this whole year. I mean, I wouldn't trade him for Mike Williams. His production and ceiling has been as high as Mike Williams, and we just saw him go to uncharted territory, 201 yards, the second receiver this season to do so, outside of Devontae Adams, who is actually a key point of news here, might miss this Thursday night game against the Cardinals due to COVID. Jamar Chase has just been phenomenal. There are few wide receivers at this point who are better from a fantasy scoring perspective and production potential in their offenses. I mean, he is totally, and don't get me wrong, T. Higgins is an awesome player, and he is a productive fantasy asset, but he has completely pushed him to the back burner in terms of people who thought T would be the number one option in this offense. Man, Jamar Chase is a special player. I'm not moving him right now. It would be very hard-pressed to find a deal where you're getting more productivity in return and more potential upside than what you've already got with yourselves on your roster in Jamar Chase. All right, that was my buy, sell, or hold segment for Week 8 fantasy football action. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave it with a like and click that subscribe button before you head on out. We're closing in again on 3K subs, and we'd love to reach that milestone by the end of the week. So, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace out.